This is a little embarrassing, but do you ever read other people's diaries? I know it's important for kids to have privacy. You're not supposed to look under their pillows or rifle through their drawers or dig through their closet or dive under their bed to try to figure out where they hid their journal. And if you find their journal, you're certainly not supposed to take out power tools to drill through the padlock, and you're not supposed to cut off the bindings to get inside. You may want to know what your kid is thinking, but you're not supposed to do that. For one thing, they might be able to tell you were there, and how can you keep spying on them if they catch you? Trust is important in a parent-child relationship, but it's fine with adults, right? Think about it for a minute. As adults, we're supposed to be compassionate, good communicators, understanding and empathetic. What better way than reading someone else's diary? How else could we learn it that efficiently? Their thoughts are right there, written down, ready for us to read. It's the responsible thing to do. I read diaries all the time, but I do confine myself to adult diaries because children just aren't that interesting. But when it comes to grown-ups, I'd be absolutely neglecting my moral and ethical duty if I didn't read people's diaries. Today we're talking about one of those diaries. Specifically, I'm talking about Frater Akkad's magical diary, not a normal diary, a magical diary that was published in the early 20th century. Yes, I know, reading published diaries is a lot more ethical than reading diaries that people are hiding. But that's coincidental. It's still a diary, right? It's still taboo to read. Give me this. In case you don't know, magical diaries are records of magical experiments and experiences. They can be private or shared, and when they're private, it's as icky to dig through them as it is to rifle through your kid's fanfic file, and trust me, you don't want to see that. But a lot of them are written as a record specifically to show other people. When we do that, it's usually to show it to someone in our own religious tradition or to a peer so that they can give us their opinion on what they read and on what we experienced and recorded. A person who analyzes a magical diary can, if they're wise and knowledgeable, offer helpful advice and work as a sort of spiritual advisor. And the great thing about it being written down is they can do that without you having to recount all the details of that time that you summoned Paimon from memory. No, they can just see it all written out, and all the details are there. All the circumstances that could influence it, from your mood to astrological signs to the point in your menstrual cycle, are all written down, nice and easy, and no memorization is required. It's right there, written down. That's particularly helpful when you're doing magic, because a lot of it involves inducing a trance state or going into a meditative state, and it can be really easy to forget what happens during rituals because of that altered state of consciousness. The whole point of the entire endeavor is to take as much into account as possible so that you can share it and analyze it and look at it and figure out whether you're completely insane or something actually magical happened. We may not know for sure if it's magical for some time or ever, potentially. A lot of people like to say it can't be proven. I don't know at all about that. The current science isn't very far along, so when things look like they work, maybe they work. But at least we record all the times that magic doesn't work so that we know that we're a little bit off. Aleister Crowley called Frater Akkad's journal Liber 165 when he put it into print in the Equinox. That was like 100 years ago, which is fantastic because it means that if I really want to torture you, I can read it to you. No copyright. But I won't do that. I have pity. My religion tells me I shouldn't, but I do, so you're spared. Crowley put a lot of things in that magazine, but the central focus was esoteric and magical studies through a scientific lens, something he called scientific illuminism. I assume that he printed Akkad's journal to provide instruction to readers so that they can learn what's possible and maybe even correct their own errors through seeing Akkad make similar mistakes. Why else would you publish a magical journal? It has to be for the reader's edification. Although we are talking about Crowley, so I can't put the idea that he was trying to manipulate or shame people completely out of mind. He wasn't always the most savory character. And that points out something else I wanted to talk about with regard to journals and magical diaries specifically. It's not always the safest practice, much like confession or auditing or counseling provided by religious people. It can be used to control people, to blackmail them, to manipulate them basically. What you're hoping for with a spiritual advisor is that they will look at what you are, see all the vulnerable parts, and guide you towards things that are better for you. Not them, for you. And some of them do that. And the problem is that it's really hard for a guru or a guide of any kind to do that without that kind of information. Vulnerability, like so many things in life, is a two-sided sword. It can be used to manipulate and harm you, or it can be used to guide and help you. It's one or the other, and I guess sometimes you probably get both. That if the person you're showing these journals and these records, or even these intimate thoughts to, is trustworthy, and if they're knowledgeable and they're wise, they'll be able to help you far more than people without that information ever could. So be careful who you share with, but don't be afraid to share. People asking for personal details doesn't necessarily mean that there's something bad or wrong or nefarious going on. They could legitimately want to guide you and help you in the best way possible. A bit like a therapist, which just as dangerous sometimes. Frater Akkad's diary has a record of several astral journeys, and it also has commentary by Aleister Crowley. Some of those journeys, not all of them, but some of them, are perfectly respectable. Others involve the spiritual equivalent of holding hands with angels and demons and incubi and succubi. Actually, he doesn't mention any of those, but wouldn't it be great if he did? Angels, demons, ghosts, spirits, whatever nefarious little ether-dwelling things, going in and joining hands with everyone he met, standing in a circle, and singing Kumbaya while birds sang and they radiated love to everyone in the entire world. And while a lot of teachers and guides might have been delighted to see something so positive and so loving and so inspiring in what he experienced, Crowley looked at it and saw Sunday school. He saw Christian influence pushing out the rest of experience. He saw too much love. And so what he did was he asked Akkad a question. He said, "What's the matter with hate?" And I hated him for that. I responded incredibly viscerally. My body stiffed up like this and my eyes got wide, and I went, "What's the matter with hate? Everything's the matter with hate. It's mean and it's bad and it hurts people and it's not good and we shouldn't do it." Then I kind of rambled to myself about how if this is what Thelema is, maybe I don't want to be a Thelemite. Maybe this is bad. Maybe I should go away. This is all awful. It was very stressful. Even though Crowley didn't go quite as far as saying hate was good, he did kind of suggest it was when he said that hate and love were basically the same, at least from beyond the abyss. And that whole idea just stuck inside my head. It clung and congealed and got all gloopy in there like tar in a smoker's lung. It was all gummed up and clingy and sticky, and it was gross, and I don't recommend it. It wasn't fun. I didn't like it. My responding negatively to something Crowley wrote is not exactly novel. It happens all the time, and that's a lot of why I like to read him, actually. He encourages me to seriously consider things that I'd otherwise dismiss as wrong or bad or evil or even stupid occasionally. And people who can do that for me get me thinking deeper and more carefully, and they get me considering points of view that I wouldn't otherwise encounter, and I treasure that. That expands me. It expands my world, and it makes the whole of existence make a whole lot more sense, and I love that. As often happens when I read Crowley, I did eventually respond to his wickedness here by taking it seriously and contemplating it for myself. When I did, I asked myself some basic questions. What is wrong with hate? Can hate even be good? Initially, the idea seemed absurd. Hate is the definition of bad. It's the wellspring of evil. It's certainly not good. You may notice in all of that I didn't mention any reason that hate is bad. There's no actual substance to what I just said. I gave judgments, but those judgments preceded analysis. I took it for granted that hate was bad. I was so sure about it that I didn't even bother to analyze why I thought hate was bad. Flimsy ideas like that, especially when paired with strong emotions, that's a flashing neon light that you need to dive in and see what's going on. And yes, that's true even when it seems obvious that your assumption is true. In fact, that may be when it's most important, because those are the ideas we take for granted. Ideas we take for granted we don't challenge nearly often enough, and so they can be wildly wrong without us having any idea. Not having any idea of the truth, not something we want, or it's at least not something I want. I don't know about anyone else. Maybe you want it. All I know is that when I find thready little slips of thought paired with strong emotion, that's a sign that I need to investigate. It often means there's a reason my limbic system doesn't want to investigate that particular thought, which means my ego might be threatened by what's behind it. And we like threatening egos. We like killing egos. We like going right in and chopping off the ego's head and replacing it with the ether. We want to be all of the things, not just our egoic self. And so I had to ask myself more questions about it. I had to ask, why did I respond that way? Why did I instantly hate Crowley for suggesting that hate might not be an awful thing? Why did I think that hate was necessarily bad? Why was I so afraid of thinking about hate being bad? Why was I so scared that my whole body tensed up and just directed that hatred outward instead of looking in? I had to know. And because I had to know, I threw on galoshes, big rubber boots, rubber protective gear and gloves and a clothespin on my nose, and I dove right into that sewer because if I was trying to protect myself that much, it pretty much had to be a sewer. Now, this is just shadow work. That's all I'm actually advocating, is recognizing that when a strong emotion is paired with a flimsy thought, it usually means your shadow is hiding behind that protective anger, that protective emotion. And when you recognize that, it's time to dig in. Shadow work is nothing new, but a lot of people talk about their shadow like it's something that's important to work out because even though you can repress it for a while and it won't affect you at all in that period, it'll eventually explode and get goopy sewage all over everything. And yes, that's undesirable, but it's not personally what I found with my shadow. The more insidious way that the shadow influences a life is by casting a pall over everything. It doesn't actually get pushed down and hidden away to the point where it doesn't influence one's life. It expresses itself in a different way, in a way that your eyes have adjusted to because you've been cast in shadow all the time in every way. And so you think it's something else. That's how my shadow often works, at least. That's how it often works when I've recognized it for what it is. And that's what I want to help with here. The most marked case of that in my own life was with anger. And that started when I was very, very young. When I was a toddler, some things happened that I can't talk about on YouTube. And because I was so small and my aggressor was so large, my nervous system basically looked at that and went, we can't possibly fight this, we have to hide. But we couldn't hide, so we did the flop thing instead. And at that point I couldn't really feel any emotions about it because my body went, this is okay, this is fine, we can deal with this is fine, go on, we're not angry, it's good. So I didn't feel any anger then, and I didn't feel anger in a visceral way that I recognized as anger for a very, very long time. This is what happens when we can't actually fight against the thing we should be angry at successfully. Our nervous system tries to protect us by neutering that anger. We even see this in our ape relatives. It's pretty common for, say, an alpha to attack a beta, and that beta to go and take their aggression out that they felt towards the person who attacked them on people lower than them, because attacking the person in charge could be really dangerous, but attacking the people under them, not so much. Anger doesn't really seem to go away. Even when it feels like it goes away, even when you don't feel it towards the person who's hurting you, it needs to be vented somehow. And I was afraid of anger, and I was afraid of feeling anger because of that early programming on a neurological level. So I didn't consciously feel anger, but when I look back, I can see it. I would criticize, not to them, but internally, the way they acted, what they liked, their enthusiasm, their loudness, their energy, basically anything. I felt like that actually made me better. It made me more obedient, it made me quieter, it made me calmer, and in the terms of the time, more mature than my peers. I make mistakes, what can I say? That general disdain of my peers mutated when I got a little bit older and realized all of these people are contributing to terrible systems and they don't even feel bad about it. That became the new reason that I felt kind of disgusted and wanted to distance myself. And finally, it reached its eventual permutation not long after that point, when I realized that I wasn't actually any different than my peers in that respect. I didn't go out and help things either, and I also consumed things I had no business consuming. And so, I hated me. I hated everyone in the world, including myself, except for the person who attacked me and for the actual event when it happened. And that's not a coincidence. That is exactly what happens when we don't or can't be angry at the things that actually hurt us. The hatred just spills over everything. And it may take a lot of shapes. You may feel superior, you may feel more intelligent, you may feel more mature. But in the end, it's really just anger, and it's misdirected anger. A lot of people who think very highly of themselves are doing some permutation of this. We all like feeling superior, don't we? We tend to try very hard to feel superior to others. And that's how my shadow tends to work, at least when it's particularly insidious. It isn't this pattern of, oh, you can push it down, you can hold it back, but it will explode. Instead, it's very drip, 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 drip. But it drip drips until there's a flood, as opposed to holding it back and it eventually going out. I'm sure shadows work both ways, but it's important to be aware of this alternate method of operation, because otherwise you'll end up thinking all these things that you like about yourself are actual things you like, as opposed to just your shadow playing tricks on you. The way I actually fixed all of this was accidentally getting into magic. The basic process was me summoning up a spirit that conveyed anger to me, and we had little chats, and I let her help me feel the emotion itself. And after a long time of doing this and engaging her in that meditative space, I was able to understand that anger itself was useful, and I had been leaving a very useful tool outside and away and refusing to use it. And refusing to use it is why I never actually put up boundaries. It's why I never actually protected myself, and why I didn't protect the people I cared about, or the things I cared about, nearly as much as I should have. Because I couldn't feel that emotion, because that emotion was taboo. But magic brought it back, and that was good. That was very good. I definitely recommend that. And suddenly I could feel angry again. And the thing about feeling anger directly, as opposed to a weird, weaker, more diffuse proxy, is none of that was really okay anymore. I extracted myself from a very dangerous situation, with help, to be clear, and I started asserting myself really for the first time, because I realized that when I have things that I hate, and things that are dangerous for me, and things that make me angry, then those are things I need to get away from if I want to preserve myself and those things I care about, and to produce and do as much as I want to do in life. And feeling anger let me do that. So I learned a long time ago that anger was definitely a good thing, but I did not apply that immediately to Crowley's statement about hatred. I took meditating on it for quite a while to realize that hatred is just anger pointed at a specific person or object or event or problem. Hatred is directed anger, which that's actually good. It's much better than diffuse anger, I will say that. Because when we channel anger, when we channel any strong emotion, we can use the power and energy and force of that emotion to enact the goal that we point it towards, or that we allow it to point itself towards. It's much better to have your faucet working and unclogged so that the water comes out of the spigot when you want it and you can wash your hands with it, than it is to have it clogged terribly and flood the entire house. One, the other, I think we know which one we want. And anger works the same way. All parts of our shadow and all negative emotions work the same way. Horses can be wild, or they can be bridled and put in front of a carriage. When they stay wild, even though they're in front of us, they pull us in random directions and we don't have any control over them. But if we hold the reins and direct it, then we can use all of that power, all of that strength, all of that energy to go exactly where we need to go, and that's what we want. Plato talked about this, and I don't always agree with Plato. In fact, I kind of agree with Vicini.
Have you ever heard of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates?
Yes?
Morons.
But they were also very smart, and sometimes they said good things. I think what happened when I read Crowley was that I was thinking of hate in terms of hate speech and irrational hatred of entire groups, of hatred that prevents the unification and the collaboration between people who are different. But I'm not sure he was saying that was good. I mean, maybe he was. He did have certain prejudices. Even if that was his opinion, I don't have to listen to him. But even my resolution of hatred as anger pointed in a specific direction, that still isn't quite what Crowley was getting at, or at least it seems to me to be a different thing than he was getting at, because it still implies a very strong preference for love over hate. And he didn't say that hate is also good. He said, what's the matter with hate anyway? From beyond the abyss, they look as like each other as two new pennies. That's what I was describing. I was describing two very, very different things. And I was describing acknowledging and accepting anger, and eventually even hatred, as a method of hating fewer things, less often, and in a more productive way. That's still a very strong preference for love, like a ridiculously strong preference. And that's clearly not what Crowley was going for, or at least, according to my reading of the text, that's not what he was going for. He's talking about From Beyond the Abyss, which is in Kether. Kether is the very top of the Tree of Life. There's all kinds of things underneath it, including the world, which is down here. Kether up here. You kind of have to get out of the world to get to Kether. Anyone who's actually in Kether does not have the individual viewpoints down here, or if he does, he has all of them. So it didn't really surprise me that you said that love and hate look the same from Kether. That's sensible, that's fine. But I wasn't sure whether we as human beings ought to think of things that way, so I went up and I tried to look at things from that God's eye view of Kether. And what I found from doing that was a definition of love and hate that I think are useful for these purposes. Love is a fixation or attraction that seeks to bridge the distance between two objects. Basically, love sees another thing all the way over there, and it tries to bring them together. The whole point is diminishing the distance between two things so that they can unify. And when they're unified, they stop being separate, and they're both in the same place, and they aren't in whatever different places they were each in before they're together. Hatred, by contrast, is a visceral, prejudicial response against something else. It encourages us to attack other things, or at least to distance ourselves from them. It also impacts the distance between two objects. It encourages us to push things away, to create a larger distance. But they're both types of movement. Love pushes things closer, hate pushes things further away. But when we love something and get closer to it, we also go further away from whatever was over here. So this hand going towards love over there, going away from whatever is over here. So whatever is over here is suddenly hated. And when we decide that we hate something and we go away from it, we also go towards something over here. So this hand deciding it hates thing over there goes poop, and its hatred propels it towards something else. The hatred and the love are just two sides of the same coin. Ultimately, you just end up with all these clappy hands all over the screen, and you can't really tell which one's love or hate at that point. It's just all kinds of flappy-wappy. Love and hate abounds one way or the other. It's just a matter of where they are and what shapes they're making. And while that can hurt a lot for us here down on Earth, or can be delightful for us here down on Earth, hate and love both make the world rich by expanding the full spectrum of emotions that exist. And I quite like that I can hate, and I quite like that I can love. Sometimes we even feel both towards the same person. I know that's how I've been with Crowley. So it's a lot of fun. We like variety, we like the change, we like all the good and all the bad. That's the whole point. But the problem here is that we aren't in Kether. We're living, breathing, drinking, eating human beings. We need to be safe. We need to meet our needs. And if we fail to do any of that at any point, this body will dissolve. And this consciousness, I mean, people debate this, but ultimately we won't be this body anymore. This body won't be maintained unless we prioritize its needs. And to prioritize its needs, we need to love and pursue the things that are good for us and hate and avoid the things that are bad for us. And when I say us here, I am talking about this individual body, this particular organization of DNA. Everything living is like this, so from our subjective point of view, we do need to see hate and love as different, though perhaps as equally useful and equally admirable when used correctly. But I guess a lot of religious people, and a lot of spiritual people in particular, disagree. They want love for all things all the time. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I honestly think all they're really doing is boosting their ego. They're afraid of parts of themselves, they're disgusted by parts of themselves, they hate parts of themselves and similar actions in other people, and they respond to this by denying all of that, by pushing it aside, by saying they don't have it. Basically, they make this big old shadow that contains all the things that they don't think they should have if they're a spiritual evolved person. And I understand that impulse. It's very hard to accept the limitations and the pettiness that so often comes along with being human. It's natural to want to be above that, to transcend all the worst parts of humanity and become something grander than everyone around you. We all want to be superhuman, but that's ego talking 100% of the time. Hot take, But I think ego has uses. However, letting ego rule you while claiming to be ego-free is just... I don't want that, and I hope you don't want it either. Humans have a broad and diverse toolkit of stuff that we can feel, and because we can feel all of those things, we can use all those to propel various different actions to accomplish various different goals, and I think that's a lot more beautiful than just trying to be at peace with everything. Did I look like I was at peace? I probably looked corpse-like. Emotions are power. We want to use that power. We don't want to deny it. Despite the fact that we've accepted hate as something that is good and useful and something that we want in ourselves and the world, hate isn't always right. It's not always used correctly. It can be misdirected, just as I illustrated earlier with my hatred of my peers and my world and my teachers and myself. But when it is pointed in the right direction, it's incredibly useful. And there's no reason to want to get rid of that, and there's no reason to malign that if it's being used correctly. We're most able to use it correctly when we acknowledge what we feel, and we try to assess the problems as objectively as we can. Once we add that objectivity to the emotion, we can direct everything to where it needs to go, and we can accomplish good things. So, by this point, you must see that hate really is as good as love. We don't even really need to minimize it, we just need to use it to solve problems instead of to cause brand new problems for other people or other parts of the world. Hate, like every other emotion, is good. Emotions, just as emotions, before we even control them, are fine. They don't need to be rational, can't be rational, and have no need of justification. They are. And because they are, they give us their power and their force and their fire. And we want all of that. We want to use it the same way our ancestors utilized the fire that started when lightning struck trees. Because when we decide to do that, we get rid of forest fires, we get fireplaces and cooked food, and then our brains increase in size, and it's good for the whole species. Not really the whole world, given what we're doing with technology right now, but we'll solve that in time. Enough of us do care about it, I think, hopefully. Okay. If not, nature will solve the problem. But we do want to be aware, and we can't be aware if we live in denial, or if we're too scared of feeling what we feel for fear of the danger that might arise from our own emotions. Once we are honest with it, we will be aware of the truth of these things, and the truth does, in fact, set us free. When we are free, we control it instead of it controlling us. So, hate is good, actually. You do well to hate. Hate more and hate honestly. And try to see the hatred of others as the self-preservation mechanism it really is. They may not be directing it correctly. No one always directs it correctly. But that hatred and that anger is their body trying to protect them from what it perceives as a threat. And it's okay that they feel that way. We just want to help them see the real threats and not imaginary ones. When they can do that, they can do what they are here to do, solve what they are here to solve, and produce what they are here to produce. When they do that, they've gotten one step closer to enacting their true will. And as we all know, your will, nothing else, is your right. So, final words now that I have gone into the Lima stuff again. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.